CNN Politics, an article by Jim Sciutto, Pamela Brown, and Eric Bradner, dated April 14th, 2017 at 12:49 a.m. Eastern Time. Headline: British intelligence passed Trump associates' communications with Russians on to U.S. counterparts. So, George, what you're saying, and the reason I'm bringing this up is because I know a lot of liberals who are so bought into this collusion hoax are going to say, oh, I heard George in the Bongino show, he's just trying to deflect. What you're saying has already been reported by left-leaning media outlets. There's nothing conspiratorial about this at all because the article's still up. Your British connection is already documented, is what I'm getting at.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Stephen Halper, the British government, and including Downer. By the way, I don't know if we got to Downer, if we did earlier, if we didn't, but that's somebody.
No, not yet. But let's get to him now because that's a fascinating angle on this because Downer is the Australian ambassador, but you meet him again in London, which seems to be the geographical center of all of this suspicious stuff going on around you.
Oh, absolutely. Okay, so just so everyone understands, the current narrative is that I was in a bar randomly drunk and Alexander Downer stumbles upon me. He's drunk and we're talking about conspiracy. That's, I guess, what the current fake narrative is. Now, let me explain to everyone what the truth is. This was no random meeting. This meeting was orchestrated and it was made through 3 intermediaries, okay? The first intermediary was an Israeli diplomat named Christian Cantor in London who despised Trump, who one day told me after Trump's foreign policy speech, I want to introduce you to my girlfriend. Now, who was this person's girlfriend? She just happened to be an Australian intelligence officer and the assistant to Alexander Downer named Erica Thompson. Now, I meet with her and she's belligerent. You know, she's calling Trump a pariah. That the campaign is it's a horrible campaign and, you know, Trump will never win kind of thing. So anyway, I'm listening to these people's opinions. And then I have an interview with the Times of London, which is London's, you know, it's the most powerful newspaper in London. And in this newspaper interview, I basically state that David Cameron, the Prime Minister of the UK, should retract his comments about Trump being an idiot for his Muslim ban comments. And that, you know, he should reach out to Trump in a more productive manner and because he's likely going to be the next president. Now, that same night, there was all over the UK and around the world, there was some title along the lines of Trump demands apology from Cameron. It was a very, you know, sensationalized title, you know, that brought a lot of heat on me, including from U.S. intelligence people in the UK. The day after this, so for everyone keeping track, this is May 2nd. 2016. The day after that interview, I have 2 guys, Americans from the U.S. Embassy, reaching out to me, which I think were DIA people. And they tell me, we want to meet with you. Their names are Gregory Baker and Terrence Dudley. I think Terrence Dudley is still at the London Embassy right now as a Navy attaché. They want to meet with me and, you know, they're whining me, they're dining me as if I was Marilyn Monroe or, you know, some beautiful woman, you know, something that just never made sense to me, you know. They're spending a lot of money on me. They're probing me. They're asking me about my ties in the Middle East. You know, let's go back to that theme. They're asking me about what Trump wants to do with Russia. I said, look, I don't know. I mean, this is basically I'm just deflecting them. And then a day after these guys reach out to me, this is May 5th now, okay?
Right.
I have Erica Thompson message me and say, hi, George, I would just like to let you know that Alexander Downer just wants to meet with you. Now, this Alexander Downer, for all the listeners, this isn't a random low-level Australian diplomat. This man ran the equivalent of the CIA in Australia for 17 years. He was the foreign minister, and he was their biggest diplomat in London. He wants to meet with you over drinks. Now, on May 10th, I go to this meeting. So remember, I have an Israeli diplomat, I have an Australian intelligence officer, I have this strange interview with the Times of London, I have U.S. intelligence officers, and then Downer meeting with me, okay? So this wasn't a random meeting. This was all very orchestrated.
Right.
I go to meet Downer. Within 1 minute or 2 minutes of sitting down with this person, he pulls his phone out of his pocket and he starts holding it up to me as if he's filming me or taking a picture or something very strange. And that is why, I was always under the suspicion that this guy was filming me, recording my conversation, and now there's evidence that he was actually recording this conversation, and he didn't want to talk about the U.S.-Australia relationship. He basically was there to pass a message along from the UK to Trump to stop, supporting Brexit. Remember, Brexit was the thing everyone was worried about at the time in the UK, and that, Trump is a pariah. And I never in my life talked about emails with this person.
So wait, this is important. He doesn't bring up this email thing at all because, George, as you well know, the New York Times did a big expose in December alleging that it is this boozy meeting, that you were thoroughly intoxicated and you happened to slip out that the Russians had emails on Hillary. Now, are you saying none of that happened?
I'm telling you, I have zero. Like I said, I remember so much about this meeting, and I have zero memory whatsoever of ever talking about emails. So I'm confident that I never did talk about emails. I have no memory of talking about emails.
Does Hillary come up?
I'll get to that in one second of how she came up. But what Downer has done in subsequent interviews he's given lately is he's contradicted himself at least 3 times about what was actually said at this meeting. Not even Downer knows what he's talking about. and then people, always ask me, well, how would he know? How would he pass this information, apparently? And I said, how would Mifsud know? I mean, Mifsud knew it the week before, or Downer did. And I also find it very strange that Downer just wanted to meet around 10 days after Mifsud tells me this information. The whole thing seems very strange and very orchestrated. But what I'm telling,
almost like they were trying to pull the information they pushed into you through Mifsud out to use to set up you as a middleman. I mean, it's perfectly logical at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with what you're saying.
But George, I don't mean to interrupt because you're more important than I am here, but it makes sense all these multiple meetings then with the DIA officials, the Intel connected people. It seems that there were multiple interactions with you, from my perspective as a former LEO, law enforcement officer, to try to get you to just volunteer this information about these Russian emails or this Russian dirt, the information they'd pushed into you, right? But you're not giving it up because there's nothing to give. So that's when I think Downer and maybe the frustration sets in. But what I'm still perplexed about is how would the New York Times, where are they getting this information from? That one, if you could just address these couple things. One, were you drunk?
Absolutely not. I had one drink. Downer had one drink. And the meeting was not a pleasant one at all. No one was sitting there drinking or getting drunk.
Because that's important. Because I think what the New York Times wants people to believe is that you in a moment of drunken peak, you slipped and released this classified information. We now know you were not intoxicated as alleged in some of those pieces by the New York Times. But secondly, why do you think they invested so much of their journalistic integrity into putting out this article based on a source that there was this big conversation about you talking about emails if both you and Downer, the two participants, both of you are saying it didn't happen? What is going on? What are we missing?
You know what? This is my theory, okay? I believe, like we said, there was a lot of disinformation. This was a disinformation campaign. This whole operation was just orchestrated to have me set up in various traps, okay? Now, what I really think happened is that Stephen Halper's role was to cover for Alexander Downer so that Alexander Downer would never have to be revealed as a source for this potential fake information, okay? Because obviously there were recordings of Halper, so even if, he wanted to say Papadopoulos said this, if I didn't say it, they could never have used it. So what I think happened is they found this mope, Alexander Downer, who just, for all the listeners out there, he invested $25 million into the Clinton Foundation. He was part of the uranium stuff with Russia. He's a big Clinton ally. And I think he was just willfully part of this group that was used to just create this fake story that Papadopoulos told me this information, and he's just used as a pretext for an investigation. There's absolutely no other explanation because I never remember telling him this information about emails. And in his interviews he's given, he himself has stated the same thing, that Papadopoulos never mentioned emails. So I don't know what's going on, except that somebody may have screwed up.
George, this makes a lot of sense, and it explains the animosity of Halper and others towards you as you fail to relay to them that you have information about Russian emails. Think about it, right? They throw all these people out at you. They're not getting anything. Everything fails. Finally, the agency or some folks working with Halper go, hey, brother, this is our last shot. You better get this information about these emails out of George. That explains why he's sweating and he was getting angry at you when you weren't talking about the emails.
And exactly. And think of it this way. Let's say I told Alexander Downer that information in May, which let's just assume for a minute, right? Why then would you need Stefan Halper 4 months later to come out of the blue and try and make me repeat apparently the same thing I just told Alexander Downer? Isn't Alexander Downer a strong enough witness, especially if he was recording my conversation? What was the point of Halper? I think that's he's a very important person in this entire saga, and we need to get to the bottom
I
of
think
what
you're
he was
right.
really up to.
He is a source to cover what was their use of foreign intelligence people who were in diplomatic posts. I think it makes perfect sense.